Hello and welcome. And well, we've just had the third day of the Atomic Mass Games like mini extravaganza, and they've spoken about Legion's future, and I mean the future with them as well as the future for the FFG stuff. And there's some really big things coming. Mainly, I think it's the sub factions. I think the sub factions, which aren't really sub faction, the battle forces, I think is what they're calling them. And I mean, there's quite a few changes. I've got LJ Pena's recap on Facebook here. We'll see what I can remember as we go through, but it's going to be pretty interesting. So you might have seen already that they released a video talking about the Shadow Collective, which had a lot of characters from season 7 of the Clone Wars, which is bad because I'm only up to season 5, so I didn't actually recognize them when they were shown. But I'll show you some of the spoilers. So this is the infantry support platform. This is actually for the separatists, not the separatists, the Republic, sorry. And yeah, so you can, if you're interested in that card, fine. For me, I'm more interested in the game as a whole rather than say like, hey, this card is great or what have you. But it is what it is. And you can see the upgrades here. But really, it starts getting interesting like towards the end of this. So yeah, we've got the Persuader tank, and this is all fine. Like, sure, I'm just showing you this so you've got it. But really, it gets really, really interesting when we start looking at these mercenaries. Now, these mercenaries, the Shadow Collective, it sounds like to me, and I could be completely misconstruing it, that they're actually going to be a faction on their own, essentially a scum faction. But the scum factions are basically there's going to be different, I forgot the wording. I want to say factions, but that faction doesn't make sense. But like, what did they say? They've got a designation where it's like the Pike Syndicate is one, and then the Hook Clan would be another. Can't remember the exact wording of that, but basically the different variants of them, and they won't necessarily all play nicely. So some commanders will only be able to issue orders to the Pike Syndicate, for example. The Pike Syndicate commanders will only issue to them, kind of thing. So there's two things you can do with them. It sounds like you can run them on their own. Fine, they'll have their own commanders and stuff like that. I'm presuming Darth Maul might be like a commander and an operative, depending on what weapons you give him, because they hinted at a variant with his loadout affecting his playstyle on the table. So yeah, so really interesting stuff. That in itself is interesting because they essentially announced a starter box as well. So that will, to my mind, looks like it's going to be a one-player starter box just for the Scum and Villainy faction. Now I don't know. Maybe they'll be called Mercenaries, maybe they'll be called Scum. I'm not sure if that's been announced. It's been tricky to really keep up to date with all of the information because they don't have the one website. Everything we're getting is from these streams, and if you don't watch every minute of every stream, then you might not have seen it. But yeah, these Pike Syndicate, for example, are some of them, and these mercenaries they'll go in some factions. Now, my guess would be they would be the Separatists and maybe the Galactic Empire. Maybe they would be the two factions that they can go in as well as being on their own. It's hard to really say. Obviously, we don't have the points here. This independent thing is like a keyword that they were speaking about with the mercenaries. That's all good. Self-preservation is quite a nice little role. These are the miniatures for them. There's two heavies, the whip and the thingy, and it actually showed the upgrade cards, which unfortunately isn't here. Darth Maul here is pictured with the double lightsaber, but he did on the video have the dark saber and whatever the other weapon is. It might not even be a dark saber, but it's a dark saber-esque weapon. This is Capo. The Pike Syndicate is a commander basically, but you can take him as a unit upgrade leader, if that's something you want, because you're running the Pike Syndicate as a different mercenary unit, if that makes sense, a different mercenary faction. Oh, the sun is blinding the background. Yeah, so this is the upgrades for that unit as well. You can see obviously they've got the short range guy and the long range guy, completely fine. Then here's where it gets a little bit interesting. So they spoke about the rules changing just holistically, that they're going to be doing some erratas. The classic one is that Vader's going to get Compelled Trooper and something else which is escaping me at the moment. But basically Vader is getting changed and buffed. Now his points and stuff like that might change. Now they hinted that that'll actually be happening like a completely across the board. Not like a second edition worthy, I think, but there will be a significant amount of erratas focusing on the Rebels and the Empire mainly, but with some changes to the newer factions. Now, Vader being buffed is probably a good thing. You really want your iconic characters to be pretty well usable and Vader's not, and that sounds like it's going to be a change. But they did say they would be changing some actual just game rules, which initially I was like, oh, what are they planning on changing it? And then they give an example about the objective cards. They have a proper name that I never remember. You know, the thing where at the start of the game, the battlefield conditions, maybe, I don't know. Well, anyway, you know where you actually take 12 and then you discard one of each and then you do 3. Well, instead of discarding any, they're saying what they've been playtesting, and it should be out in the next 1 month to 2 months, but they didn't want to get like pinned down on the date, that you would actually just pick all of your cards would get used, and then I presume it would still be 2 discards from each person, essentially reducing the possibility of getting that like perfect combination for somebody, which would possibly mainly balance the game because nobody would be happy instead of one person being happy. Because there's some times where if you get the right card in slot 3, then it's not an auto win, but you have a strong favourite in that game. So that's the change that they're thinking about making. They did talk about also simplifying some of the other rules, but no examples were given beyond that, I think. So they also said, and I realise I'm just stuck on this page while I'm saying this because this is sort of what they just verbally said rather than showed, was that they do not want to be errating things all of the time. So yeah, they're going to do it now, but they don't want to get in the habit of just errating things and calling that a day. What they did say is that obviously I still think they'll maintain with the points. Now, I want to talk about the Mercenaries because they also said they were going to update stuff like Cad Bane, Bosk, and Boba Fett. And they said there will be a card pack that has them in it. So they also, I think they said they'd be in the RRG, the rules. Is it RRG? You know, the rules book. Now, these we were talking about where they'd been working on this. This specific shot here was essentially the start of the transition to AMG rather than FFG. Now, I was listening in my front room whilst my daughter was eating and I was eating and stuff like that. It was very difficult to hear, but I'm not 100% sure who these are for. But yeah, they then went on to Boba Fett, and they spoke specifically here that this is the Boba Fett from the Mandalorian, and that the more Mandalorian characters would be coming, like Moff Gideon, and are they called Dark Troopers? Not 100% sure, but they'll be on their way. And yeah, they said, you know, these guys will be coming, there'll be more Mandalorian content. They very strongly hinted that Ewoks would be coming, which would be very interesting. Willow's crying in the background, I do apologise, but it just is what it is. And Boba Fett will be for, I'm pretty sure he said Rebels, right? Which sort of makes sense in the film, I guess, in the TV show. But it's really interesting if they go for Rebels because, yeah, like you essentially have a bounty hunter for Rebels. Whether or not it'll have the bounty keyword, I don't know. But what I didn't say is those other bounty hunters who'll be getting those new cards, they're actually so that they can go in the mercenary faction, but they'll be like separate cards for them, and you'll still have your old cards for your like current factions and stuff like that. Is there anything else? I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Is there anything else that I missed? Apart from the fact that the Battle Force boxes that I never spoke about, but I mentioned at the start. Essentially, the Battle Force boxes, well, we're getting one for the Mercenaries, but it sounds like, I forgot what they're called. It's sort of like an organizational chart, and you will get special command cards if you go into that. So they give examples of obviously the Mercenaries, but you're going to get the 501st, you're going to get like a droid invasion one, Hoth, and I'm not 100% sure what the last one was. I'm not 100% sure what it is for the Empire. I don't know, probably something similar. But yeah, like whether or not they'll come out as boxes, I don't know, because how are they going to sell all the command cards? Sort of sounded like it might be a box, but then are you really going to want a box with all the miniatures you already have? So maybe it'll also be a card pack. We don't really know, but there's just been like so much information there that it's a little bit awkward to take in. The mercenary faction, scum faction, whatever you want to call it, is a big one just in itself. And then, you know, all the little changes like Vader is going to be a big change in the game. But, you know, it's only a little part of everything that we've seen. They did talk about organised play, for those of you wondering, and they said they're still trying to support like having a worlds and stuff like that, but they can't really do anything about COVID. Essentially is the key thing. COVID is scuppering a lot of the plans. They are going to be doing some organized play in the store. They mentioned a skirmish one. Mm, which was like an objective based thing. I can't remember. And there was another one which I also can't remember. I do apologize. But as I said, it was quite a long presentation. And yeah, so they're trying to support organized play. Is there literally anything else? I don't know, but I do hope they do one player starter boxes for all of the factions. I think that would be quite good. It's interesting that they're going to be errating stuff like Vader. I'm curious who else will get a bit of a sneaky errata. Maybe, you know, the I don't even use it often. The rocket launchers for the stormtroopers, maybe that'll get a bit of a rework. Who knows? But yeah, one thing I'm slightly underwhelmed by, and maybe this is a little bit harsh. It's nice to see them working on the Mandalorian stuff, and they said that that was their work. However, FFG announced that they were working on the Mandalorian stuff. So did FFG announce it and then just not work on it? They were like, yeah, well, we're going to work on it. We're just not doing it yet. Very premature, it looks like, from FFG on my part. But I mean, to be fair, maybe they announced it and then 3-4 months later it was scuppered by them by going to AMG. Who knows? But one thing I'm underwhelmed by essentially is that they spoke about the long-term stuff. Yeah, it's great to get hints at Ewoks and stuff like that. I do hope for my Gungans, not gonna lie. But I thought something more major might happen, that we might actually get something like a second edition. Or we might get a clearer idea of what the vision is for the game. At the minute, just looking at the Boba Fett on his tactical rock, sort of feels like more of the same. It doesn't necessarily feel like it's anything a major evolution or anything like that. But I mean, maybe it's still too early to say. But yeah, like they did make a big point about those battle forces being about how they want to continue. I think they basically want more factions essentially, but there'll be essentially sub factions in that. You know, if you run this organizational chart, that's like its own thing, just to get out of having the 4 or 5 factions and making it a little bit more unique. But yeah, I can't think of anything else. I'm sure there'll be like loads of stuff that I skipped. But as I said, it was difficult to pay attention. Were you excited about anything in particular? Yes, it's nice to see those the Shadow Collective. They had like the I want to say Clan Ren, the Mandalorians in the Maul outfits and stuff like that. A lot of it does look pretty cool. I'm intrigued. I just sort of expected a little bit more, but maybe I'm always, you know, over ambitious when it comes to that. This is a long video. Goodbye.